Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elen Krut, and today is June 29, 2020. This interview is being conducted as part of the New York State Lawyers' response to the pandemic project for the Historical Society of the New York Courts. And we're sitting here today with Robert Brown. And Robert, last time we met was June 26th of 2020. So we are almost at exactly 1 year mark. And I would love to hear from you. It's been a year. How are you doing?
I think things are going well. We're at the point now where things are starting to open back up a little bit. I had my first live court appearance in person in Richmond County a couple weeks ago. But, we're still having virtual appearances. Some counties are doing better than others. Some are moving faster than others. There's no shortage of new clients coming in. The only thing I could say is that some of my clients that are affected by the economic downturn, they still have cases and they still want work done, but they're having a hard time paying.
Okay. So just taking a step back for a second, you said that you had your first virtual in-person appearance. How was that?
It was great. It was in Richmond County, and I got to see Judge Green in person.
Oh, wow.
And the whole staff, the whole crew was there, and it was really it was nice. It was kind of weird going into the building. There was you still wore a mask entering into the building, still wore a mask in the courtroom. It was set up where there was plexiglass, like complete plexiglass enclosure around Judge Green. And, it was separated, and we wound up keeping our masks on during the arguments. It was on the record, but it was actually a good experience to go down there.
And I think we discussed that last time we conducted your interview. We were talking about conducting virtual interviews, and especially people wearing masks and doing depositions and doing trials and not being able to read the person because half of the person's face, like I had to conduct a few depositions and people were wearing masks. I was unable to observe people's reactions. What do you think about that?
I agree with that completely. I think that before this pandemic, you don't realize how much you read from a person, how much you make from their facial expressions, how much you watch somebody's lips when they speak to try and follow what they're saying. And you don't realize it. And then when we had the pandemic, not only is what they're saying muffled, but also if you can't see their facial expressions, it was very difficult to read. And I've had quite a few virtual court appearances, and sometimes the witness had a mask on, and it was very difficult in order for them to give testimony and be heard on Zoom with the mask on. So that part of it wasn't quite so easy.
Never easy. And since we're on the topic of in-person versus virtual court appearances and depositions, have you been following what's going on with the with the virtual appearances where people are sort of now laid back? And we had a funny video posted. Everybody has access to social media where the woman says, "I am not a cat." Or one of the witnesses, the doctor, was conducting his deposition from the operating room. So people driving cars. Did you ever predict something like that to happen?
No, I can't say that I did. I actually, during this pandemic and actually a few years before, I started taking classes through Harvard Extension School. And that is on the Zoom platform. And it gave me a tremendous advantage going into this whole pandemic because I was so used to it already. I was recently at a team meeting on one of my last classes, and one of the teammates was a dentist, and he was literally in the operating room, or whatever, the dental room, doing the operation on the person. And, we were sort of horrified that, he would actually bring his camera into the room when he was doing it. But, for the most part, I know that judges are starting to crack down right now on attire. I wound up wearing a suit every time I ever appeared virtually in court, with one exception. There was one day where I didn't realize I had an appearance and it wasn't calendared. So what I did was I moved the camera up as high as I could to just get my neckline. But I was able to get through it, and the judge didn't yell at me. So I guess that was a good thing. But I do know other attorneys have been yelled at for sort of being informally dressed. So
Right. And that's just concerning attorneys, lowering the standard, getting dressed down. But also when it comes to witnesses, I've seen a deposition where somebody was moving from one room to another, and finally that person finished the deposition laying on a couch, barely holding the phone. So that's not something that I was able to foresee last year. I actually can't believe how much has happened. I think we're all underestimating how much we have been through this year. And do you have any moments to share? Because it's been a year, so obviously you have been going through this ordeal. How's your practice doing? You mentioned something about your clients. How is that going?
I think it's going very well. I mean, I'm as busy as could be. I barely can keep up at this point. But there's no shortage of new clients coming in. I think because of the pandemic, a lot of people are considering bringing lawsuits that they may not have considered before. For example, I got a partition action between a brother and a sister where the parents passed away, and the house was sort of been sitting there in both of their names for a few years, but now the sister wants her inheritance, and the brother doesn't want to sell, so we had no choice but to bring an action. But I think there are a lot of different places, either collections actions or people trying to figure out how they can come up with money, that is really making the litigation area of practice much busier.
So when you discuss money and people trying to come up with money, and I think previously you mentioned clients having a hard time to pay, do you refer to COVID hardship, financial hardship?
Well, certainly in foreclosure defense, which is one of the areas that I practice, there's some paperwork that you could fill out, an affirmation from a homeowner saying that they've been impacted by COVID. So on many of my cases, the homeowners were impacted, and I filed the affirmation. But there appears to be various stays, both of state and federal law, in the foreclosure area that are pushing the calendars back. So that's sort of happening. The other thing is my foreclosure clients now are having a hard time paying me. So for the most part, I gave many of them a break from payment during the time period that things have been slow, because it really hasn't been that busy on their cases. I've been trying to work out loan modifications for them during this time period when the lawsuit itself isn't moving, trying to work out resolutions, and we've actually worked out quite a few of them during this time period. So, and I think the banks are probably a little more motivated to give a modification at this point, because if not, they're sort of stuck, and it's going to take a while for them to move forward.
And I guess when it comes to your firm, because you employ people, you have employees. So last time we spoke, you told me that it was fairly easy for you to kind of like move forward towards virtual setup, and I think your associate was working from home, and you all went to work from home. So did you transition to in-person fully? Are you using a hybrid model? How did that happen for you?
Well, me personally, I came into the office the first day that I was allowed, and I do a lot of criminal work, and that was considered to be an important area of law that you were allowed to actually go into work. My associate was actually pregnant at the time when the pause happened, and she appeared in Kings County, and she came back to me and said, I really don't feel comfortable going to court. And I said, you know what, let's set you up and start working from home. So we did that anyway, and then everything shut down. So she was set up probably about a week before everything closed. So she had the baby in August, took maternity leave, and then when she came back to work, still to this day, now here we are in June of 2021, she's working 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week from home. So that this way, she's got some time with her daughter to spend, and she also, can come here, because some of it actually requires, shuffling papers as a lawyer. Some of it requires putting together motions and scanning things, which isn't necessarily so easy to do from home. So it's worked well that she's been working hybrid, from home 2 days a week, and my now, I guess you would say, office manager is working here 5 days a week. So she's been in every day.
Okay. And when it comes to predictions, I think the last time we met a year ago, we couldn't foresee anything. We had no idea what was happening to us, what's waiting for us in the future, and how things will play out. But now that it's been a year and we have been able to, I guess, survive, because attorneys are surviving this pandemic, we're legally remote. What do you think is going to happen? Do you have any predictions? How do you think it's going to play out?
I personally think the practice of law is significantly more efficient the way it is right now, virtually. You know, if you think about it, and I think I might have mentioned this the last time, I cover Nassau, the 5 boroughs, and the Bronx, I'm sorry, and Westchester, right? So the 5 boroughs of New York City, Nassau, and Westchester. For me to drive to Nassau County from Staten Island is an hour and a half each way, conservatively. You get somebody with a flat tire on the Belt Parkway, you could easily add a half an hour to that.
I know.
So then you get to court. So let's say I'm there at 9:30. They don't come out till 10, right? Now at 10 o'clock, they start calling cases. My case doesn't get called till 11:30. So I've spent, a good portion of my day leaving Staten Island at 8 in the morning and getting back, let's just say at 2 in the afternoon, going to Nassau County to handle a conference that probably took 5 minutes. Where virtually, if I do that, I don't leave my desk, and it just takes me the 5 minutes. So it's much more efficient for me. It's much better for the client because the client's not paying for travel time. They're not paying for the time that you're waiting around. They're only paying for the time that you're actually, involved in the conference. Now, there are criminal arraignments. The criminal arraignments are the greatest thing in the world. I mean, they just announced, I think yesterday, that we're going back to live criminal arraignments in the 5 boroughs. But for me to do an arraignment, living in Staten Island, going into Manhattan, let's say to do an arraignment, I would leave there, and the one that I just did the other day, I would have gotten there, let's say at 4 in the afternoon, and I didn't get my person arraigned until just about midnight. So I would have spent 8 hours in Manhattan just sort of waiting around to get my client out of jail. Where here, I faxed over a notice of appearance. I got contacted, and I gave them my email address. I got contacted by email. Here's a copy of your complaint, right? And here's how you can interview your client. And this is the Microsoft Teams room to do the arraignment. And I was able, and I knew most of the people, because it's the same people, the same court officers, the same staff in the arraignment part now as it was, 2 or 3 years ago. So I recognized a lot of the people via Microsoft Teams, but the amount of time that I actually spent was minimal because I was told, okay, she's ready for arraignment, and I was able to get her arraigned. So it saved me, a good seven and a half hours of downtime where I could sit at my desk and work on other matters. So, to me, that's much more efficient. But your question was, how do I see the future? And perhaps the future is for conferences, we can continue to do these conferences virtually. Now, some judges, Judge Cologne here on Staten Island, is doing something where you submit your order in advance. It's control date. You get together with your adversary, you work out either a PC order or a compliance conference order, you submit it, and you don't even have to have a conference on Microsoft Teams. Think about that for efficiency, right? It's so much more efficient. And if there's an issue, there are ways that they have to address it. But I think that motions should remain virtual. Conferences should remain virtual. And then if we get to the point of motion practice, and it's something that can't be handled virtually, then they should call us in person to go back down. And what I said the last time was, if we were to go back to in-person motions, they should be spread out across the day for a time certain.
Time certain,
right?
Yes.
Which is what Judge Porzio does here on Staten Island. Is you get on
Yes,
Microsoft Teams, time certain, be here at 11:50, and you're on at 11:50. And a lot of federal judges have always done it that way. So to me, that's a much more efficient practice of law. The one thing I noticed, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this the last time, is I find people virtually are much more polite. attorneys are much more polite with their adversaries.
Because you can just mute them.
I don't know if it's the muting aspect of it. I think that it's just when you're looking on the screen and you're looking at the judge on the screen and you're looking at your adversary on the screen, there's something about it that it doesn't raise your level of anger. Where the person sitting next to you and you know that they're lying, you're looking at them and you're getting madder and madder, and like you say something and then they say something, and the temperature keeps rising and you're going at one another for whatever reason. And maybe it's because if two people talk on a virtual platform at the same time, only one comes through and the court reporter starts yelling. You can't both talk at the same time. Even more so virtually than in person, that people tend to let the person finish speaking before the next person starts. So that politeness, I think, carries over into the argument. And,
By default.
By default. And I mean, there are times, don't get me wrong, where I'm ready to strangle my adversary, right? And I get a little wound up, but virtually it's a much calmer atmosphere, I find, and I just find people are much more polite. And I think that's how we should practice law. We should be as polite as possible. And I think that, it's done us wonders during this time period. And we're moving things along. I could say this for Richmond County. I'm not going to badmouth any other counties, but I could say our cases are moving here. Other cases in other counties, I have some cases that I just had a motion for summary judgment that was made in the summer of 2019. Just got adjourned to February of 2022. Okay, so you're talking it's going to be pending at least 2 years and 8 months if it gets decided in February, likely close to 3 years.
Wow.
For a motion. And that's not fair to the clients. If you're the client that wants justice, either you're the plaintiff or the defendant, right? If you want the plaintiff, you may want money. If you're the defendant, you may want to be cleared. But basically, it's not fair to have this hanging over your head for so long.
Right. And I would imagine that the shutdown, of course, created a backlog of cases, and they have a lot of cases. Yes, fairness is definitely at play here. So I'm just gonna assume the summation here. So for PCs and compliance conferences, you would propose to have time certains. And when it comes to something more substantial like motion arguments or depositions or trials, you would do them in person.
Yes, and even there may be some motions, right, that it may make sense to just submit, and not even do the oral argument on the motion, especially if both sides will consent to it. I remember appearing in Brooklyn in front of Judge Shack years ago, and the lawyers, it was breaking for lunch, and in Brooklyn you almost never get in before lunch, and they said, "Can we just submit?" And their papers were like this big. And the judge was like, "You think I'm reading all of that? No way, you're coming back after lunch and you're going to tell me what I need to know." And I think there may be something to that, but I would also think as a lawyer, I don't save anything for oral argument, right? Everything has got to be in my papers for appeal purposes,
of course,
right?
Yes.
So I'm I don't necessarily see the need, except for maybe clarifying questions that the judge may have on oral argument. But I do think that not all motions, if you think about it, discovery motions and minor motions like that, they could probably, again, submit those, and make a decision on the papers, or even virtually do the oral argument.
Okay, so I heard something that you would like to stay as a result of this pandemic, so that would be the time certain virtual PCs that save time and travel expenses and time traveling and for efficiency purposes. Do you have any things in mind that you would want to see go? Like something that you have experienced all this year in the course of your practice that you absolutely dislike and you would like to go back to normal prior to COVID?
I mean, the ability to, go down to the clerk's office and ask a question is gone right now, right? Where, you could call and hope to get somebody on the phone, but it's very difficult to get through on the phone to a lot of these offices. So, the interpersonal interaction, and sometimes you submit papers And the clerk's office might say, okay, well, you didn't do this, or you need to do that, right? And sometimes virtually with e-filing, they kick papers back and you don't really understand why they're even being kicked back or what you need to do to fix them. So I don't, I like the ability to interact with human beings. Yeah, and certainly sitting in a courtroom for a calendar call with friends and colleagues was always an enjoyable thing, right? I mean, you had to wait around, granted, but the interaction with people was always something that I enjoyed. But I do think that if we can do this the right way, and maybe you just say, well, if it's a dispositive motion, a motion to dismiss, a motion for summary judgment, we do those in person. All other motions we do virtually. We'll still interact with one another, and maybe it won't be 100 people, or in Brooklyn there might be 200 people at a calendar call or for a PC, but we'll interact with one another and we'll get to see our friends again. And that was when I had that one live in-person appearance a couple weeks ago. My adversary said, I kind of missed this part of it, going into court, seeing people and interacting with people. And I agree with that completely, but I do think that we can learn from the pandemic and become more efficient in a safe way, so that we don't have to worry about people getting sick, and we can practice law in a way that best serves our clients. And that's really what we're here for.
We are, but I think you touched upon a very important aspect, the human relation aspect. We are social beings, and we can't stay away from socializing with other people. It's not in our DNA. We were not built like that.
Part of it, a lot of times you can go down into court, and when you're waiting around, strike up a conversation with somebody and say, oh, I have this situation, what do you think? Oh, I did that, a year ago, I have a sample, I could send it over to you. That's missing right now, without a doubt. You could still call people up, but it's hard.
It's different because that would be, you haven't seen that person, you haven't spoken to the person, out of the blue you call for a motion. It's not the same as seeing somebody, making that small conversation. I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And the other thing is to get people on the phone, so you call and you don't get them. Now you leave a message and they're running around handling all their phone calls, and then they call you back and they're like, hey, by the way, do you have a motion, sample motion for me? It's not the same. It's not the same as sort of just doing it in a social way.
I think it's very important that we were able to, touch upon this, because this is the second interview that we're conducting. The first interview was in the beginning of COVID, and we had no idea what's going to happen to us, but essentially we were discussing the same thing. A year later, okay, nobody lost touch. We all still keep in touch with each other. We're all still practicing, but the overall theme is the same. We're social beings. We miss that in-person interaction. So that it just shows us that, despite all the changes, we may change technology, we may change the way we file our motions, but we will never change the fact that asking somebody for a motion in person is better.
No doubt. And, again, we have in Richmond County, the Richmond County Bar, right? And
yes.
We still haven't had a big event yet. And I know that there was an event for the executive board
Right.
and the directors that just got elected, but we haven't. I mean, virtually we've had a couple of events virtually, but I think everybody's looking forward to seeing one another again.
Yes.
And I think you were running the young, what's it called, the young people, young lawyers.
The
right?
young people. No, I used to be on the committee for the new lawyers. It was the new lawyers committee. This was last year ago. This was last year. This was before COVID actually hit. I don't participate in that anymore, but I guess the new lawyers committee is still trying to reach out and plan the events. So everybody is doing what they can do, as much as we can. But the overall theme is we keep reaching out. The contact should be
Right.
still there.
Well, I'm also in the New York State Bar Association, and I'm the representative for
Mm-hmm.
Staten Island to the general practice section. And one of the things that they were doing before COVID hit was they were having events at like a small local, let's say, bar, where you can get people from your county to come out, and then people from the general practice section to come in and interact, and it would try and build the membership for the general practice section. But it was also a great networking event, where I think it was something like, the concept was the general practice section would buy you a drink if you come out, right? So they would pay for whatever the first drink was, and then you were on your own from there. But they were doing that, and then we were planning it here, and then COVID hit, so we now wound up never getting it done. But I think that that's one of the things that we want to look to in the future, is sort of those type of networking events, the ability. I mean, I'm somebody that has traveled around the country for various CLEs. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers has a CLE every year in Vegas, which I would go to, and you sort of miss those things, especially when they're virtual. They're just not the same, because all it is the classroom aspect of it, right? When you go to these events live, there's all sorts of networking events, interactions with people, and you can meet people where you may wind up getting a referral from another state because you went to that event. So not only
creating new connection, yes.
Yeah, but not only are you learning about the area of law, and you're educating yourself, but you're also networking and building your network, and in a way that you'll get referrals from people that you've met over the course of time. And I think that is lost in a virtual CLE. Yesterday I did an all-day virtual CLE that was sponsored by the New York State Bar, and it was a class, and then it was a break. And what do you do on a break? You come out and you get stuck in your world, like, because your phone's ringing and clients have emergencies, and it's just not the same as going to someplace and listening and interacting with the other lawyers during the breaks.
So I am all for destination CLEs. I would love to travel somewhere or to attend a CLE in person. And unfortunately, we have been stuck with more screen time. Right. So to me, a virtual CLE has to be such a necessity that it must be a very good course, number one. And it has to be me trying to do my CLE right before my readmission, and I have to, I have to make that deadline. So give me that screen time, because otherwise, not only that, everything is on the screen, right? You're staring at your screen all day long for your emails. You stare at the screen for your virtual conferences. You stare at the screen when you do your research. And moreover, now you have your CLEs. So your life is consumed. You might as well just sleep on your screen. That's not who we are.
And there's this talk about like a Zoom fatigue.
Yes.
And I had a day where I had, like, from 8 o'clock in the morning all day I was on Zoom with court appearances.
Zoom fatigue. I'm gonna
Zoom fatigue.
That.
Yeah,
Zoom.
Give me credit for it.
I will.
Okay. So basically now I finished my whole day, and then I had my classes at night. So I was there until like 8 or 9 at night, from 8 in the morning. I was so tired and mentally tired. And there's a point where you stop absorbing what's coming at you, because you're just, it's, to me, it's like doing a deposition, right? When you do a deposition, it might be an hour long, but that takes more than an hour of your energy out of you in a day. It does,
to drain your
right?
energy.
It does.
Because you're using intellectual energy. You're sitting in a chair, so you're not doing any exercises. But your brain, people underestimate how many calories they burn while they're doing intellectual work.
I don't know if I burn any calories doing intellectual work, but I'll tell you, it's tiring.
Don't ruin that concept for me. I burn calories when I concentrate.
You're right. Give yourself credit for that one. But but it's the same thing. Like, if you're concentrating, you're right. It's exhausting, and on Zoom, maybe if you're talking to somebody in the room with you, your mind starts to wander. But when you're watching it on screen, you pay careful attention to it, and it's like 1 hour is more tiring than a normal hour. And and now when you read multiple hours through the day, you're just exhausted by it. And so that part of it, I don't think that we can necessarily just live our life on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but I do think that some sort of hybrid is the right answer.
I think it should be all necessity. It's necessity driven and we can't live on the screen. It's just not in our DNA. That's my personal view.
So we're going to interview you. I can do this.
I think I'm interviewing myself as well. I'm participating enough.
So what's your personal view
On what?
on Zoom?
Necessity.
It's a necessity?
Only based on necessity, same as virtual CLE, same as virtual anything. Let it take more time, and I agree with you about PCs, like small conferences, short conferences. I think it's absolutely, yes, I would do PCs on Zoom. Everything else, it will take more time, but that's a whole another discussion, because then my question would be, where are you rushing to? What are you, a hamster in a wheel? Like how, like you see, like you can only do so much in a day. So just because you have been afforded an opportunity to do a gazillion conferences a day doesn't mean that you should. As a person, I'm not saying as a team of lawyers in one day doing separate conferences. You as a person, you can't pour from an empty cup. How many conferences a day, how many hours a day can you sit behind Zoom before you completely exhaust yourself?
I agree.
So that's why I think we should go back to in-person, most of it. I would say like 85% of it. And yes, it's going to be slower, but we will gain the quality back. And we will not have instances where somebody has to say, I'm not a cat. And
well, that was entertaining. But let me ask you this question while I'm interviewing you.
Okay.
The foreclosure conference part, what about the homeowners?
What about the homeowners?
I mean, I understand as lawyers, right, when we go down to court, it's the same group of people, and especially in a county like Richmond, right? You're interacting with the same, 100 people on a regular basis. There may be outliers that come in from Manhattan or Brooklyn for other reasons, but it's the same regular crew. But in the foreclosure conference part, the homeowners often come down pro se before they even retain a lawyer or before they even know they need a lawyer. So now, if you've ever been in that part, that it's jam-packed in every county, right? I've done it again in many counties where people are in the hallways, there's not enough seats, and for the purpose of a pandemic, we were really on top of one another, jammed in, probably beyond the legal maximum capacity. So do we go back to that again? Or do we come up with some way to make that safer? Because I've been practicing foreclosure law long enough. There was no foreclosure conferences before 2008, right? So when the market tanked, it was in 2009 that they started with the conferences, where they told the homeowners, you have to come down, and maybe there's another way to do it. I like the idea, believe me, protecting the homeowners' rights is very important, but maybe there's another way to do it, and maybe we let them do their conferences on Microsoft Teams, rather than, because now you have a difference of people that are coming every day. And I always thought that the people that were most prone to get COVID were the people that interacted with a ton of people, right? So for instance, judges, the court personnel, you're interacting not only with the regular lawyers there, but the revolving door of litigants that come down to court.
Right.
So you're much more prone to getting COVID or anything else for that matter. Where if you had those litigants, for a while, I know what they were doing was, I think they had a pro se room set up in the courthouse. If you came down pro se and you didn't have the ability to do it on your phone, you can go into a room where there was actually a camera set up. But perhaps that's the way to do it, is to try and limit the actual litigants from participating in person, other than if it's a trial or a deposition.
So I guess my response to this would be that I guess COVID shed some light on something that has been dysfunctional for so long. Because prior to COVID, when we did not think about the disease and the illness, we had all these people, I don't want to say sardines in cans, but that's what comes to mind. And it has been going on like that in a dysfunctional way, day after day, and nobody did anything. Now we got COVID, and we were forced to open our eyes that something was not functioning properly. And maybe because of COVID, we will be able to accommodate these people virtually and in a hybrid model, because that would be a solution, yes.
Yeah, I think, if you've ever gone, like, you're saying the sardines, there are courtrooms that are just too small
Yes.
for the amount of litigants that they have. Typically those are the foreclosure conference parts, the lower criminal parts. In here it was like AP1 and AP2, where there was just so many people in those parts. There wasn't enough seats on certain days. And maybe it's that you have to, as a court, limit your calendar and say, you know what, in a lower criminal, instead of calling 120 a day, you might have to call 30 a day, and try and spread out the cases a little bit more to the extent you can with speedy trial issues. So,
Right.
listen, there are rules that we have to sort of figure our way into. But I think your point is right that when it was happening, we weren't even thinking about it.
No, it was the normal.
Right.
You see, like when we refer to this concept, we want to go back to normal, right? The normal, now that we had a chance to slow down and stop and smell the roses, right? The normal is not so normal anymore. Just now you just set the perfect example. We had such a dysfunctional part where people were just not getting enough attention. Cases were just like one after another, and I'm sure you would agree with me where the quantity overwhelms, the quality goes down. So
Yeah, I always say this, and our court system, if it were a private company, would be bankrupt, right? Because you look at the amount of fees that you pay, right? I mean, you pay for an index number $210, for a motion, $85, right? So when you pay these numbers, it's not anywhere near supporting what's going on in the system, paying for the judge and the law secretaries and all the assistants, the court officers, the court reporter, all those people, right? And the way we've operated, it can't be self-sufficient. There has to be money coming from the budget in order to keep the system running. And you would say, maybe we could use this as a way to make it more efficient and become a more efficient system.
Right, but when you create efficiency, you have to look out for quality. Because a lot of times, when something is efficient and you're trying to save money here and there, the greedy person always ends up paying twice. So
yes, I agree with that, but you have to say, like, the old system certainly wasn't efficient, right? When you'd have, one of the reasons why I stopped doing matrimonial law was that I sat in a part and I looked around the room. And I said, there's got to be, 70 lawyers, let's say, 80 lawyers in this room. And people are paying every one of these lawyers by the hour in a matrimonial case, right? And I started calculating the amount of money that the litigants were paying the lawyers just to sit around to watch a calendar call or listen to a hearing, because the judge called the hearing first before calling the calendar. And I said, it's just so unfair to the people that have to pay their lawyers because of this inefficient system that I didn't want to be a part of it. And the problem with matrimonial law is that you don't necessarily drive the bus. If your adversary's bringing order to show cause after order to show cause, you have no choice but to respond to them, right?
Right.
And you get stuck into this where all of a sudden the legal fees are astronomical, and what could be a modest household income and assets. So to me, I don't think our system was efficient at all, and I think this is a way to make it more efficient.
I agree with you 100%. I just need to argue the other side just for the sake of it, because that's what I do.
Okay.
So just imagine this. Recently, I had to call a plumber. Right?
Okay.
And the guy came to my house, and the guy looked at something that he looked at. I'm not a plumber. I have no idea what he looked at. And he was there for 15 minutes, and he charged me $250, and he left.
Okay.
Making $250 in 15 minutes. And there are numerous other professions they charge just as much, and we pay them because they're specialists in that field. So when you have to pay your attorney who is waiting for the case to be called, right? On one hand, I do feel really bad for the clients because they're paying for the attorney waiting. But then again, they're paying for the attorney waiting who went to law school and who has the knowledge and the degree to be there to represent you. So it's a no, I feel like that's a no-win situation. Like people would still be paying for services, and unfortunately they have to wait. So here I paid $250 for 15 minutes, and here people are paying X amount of dollars per hour for, yes, you have to wait.
Right. I agree. Again, with a plumber, I have no ability to be a plumber, right? So
Not a plumber either.
right. But if your plumber said, okay, you're going to charge me, what did he charge you for 15 minutes? 250. Okay.
250.
What if he said, you know what? My boss just didn't give me the parts that I need, so I got to drive back to the other side of the island and get the parts and come back. And you're going to pay me per hour for the amount of time that it takes me to go back and forth. You wouldn't be too happy about that, right? I mean, I understand the expertise part of it, right? But once we get out of the expertise and it's just the traveling, like my clients, if they're hiring me to handle a Nassau County case, they know that I tell people, look, you might be more efficient to hire somebody that's local because I have to travel. And if someone's hiring me, they know that up front. So the travel I can't really get around. But the waiting, the waiting aspect of it, think about it, why do we call 100 cases at 9:30 in the morning, right? It makes no sense whatsoever. There are ways we could do things, especially with technology, where you could check in online, and rather than doing a calendar call. And how many times have you been to court and a calendar call comes and your adversary's not there, and they walk in a minute after, right?
Yeah.
And now you have to wait for the whole calendar, and especially some places had very big calendars, and then you had to wait for a break, and then you had to wait for a second call, and then if your adversary's a per diem, the second call comes, they're not there, right? They're somewhere else. So now you're stuck again, and now they're not going to get defaulted because they're a per diem, and so that they basically, then they come back, and now when you finally say, okay, we're ready to argue, you go into the bottom of that pile, right? Because those people from the first time are being taken in order, so now you get stuck all day.
And that's when you wish you were a plumber.
Yeah. Or you said I should have gone to trade school.
No, I guess I only have one last question left for you, but I just want to mention something else. I think, as I said before, COVID is like the last year, practicing during COVID is opening our eyes to something that has been working, and we thought it was okay because that was a normal, and now we're realizing that, hey, that was not so normal, and this is how we can fix it. So today we're conducting the second interview. Maybe if we meet a year later, we're going to be discussing other changes, or we're going to be talking about, this would be a great idea again.
Yeah.
Hopefully there will be changes, but you never know. Just like last time, we don't know what the future holds.
It's always exciting when you're in life in a time of change.
Yeah.
Right? It's exciting.
Yeah.
Now, it might not be, COVID was a horrendous, cause of the change.
Yes.
But we're at a place right now where we could really look at the future and engineer the practice of law so that it's more efficient going forward. In a way that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm not trying to minimize the loss we all suffered when lots of people died and businesses, had to shut down. So I'm not minimizing that loss. All I'm saying is that you can't, dispute the fact that we do live during the time of change. Something is happening, so we just have to witness it, and we have to just embrace it and adapt. I think we talked about adaptation last time, which brings me to the next and last question. Do you have any tips for your fellow practitioners or for any viewers, anything that comes to your mind, any advice
About adapting?
Well, adapting, practicing in general, something maybe that has been working well for you and you would like to share with others.
Well, I could tell you one thing that I use, and it doesn't work for every practice area, but when I went to one of those CLEs in Vegas, they said to me, and this is a company's name is LawPay, right? But the concept is the same, right? So, I think you do defense work, so you get paid differently. But for me, one of the selling points is when my clients are going to pay their bills is not necessarily when I'm open, right? So somebody might be paying their bills on Tuesday night at 11 p.m. So under normal circumstances, older lawyers will say, well, call my office, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you can make a payment over the phone. and take the information, write the credit card number down, and go to the machine physically and type it in or whatever. And that may be even more high-tech people. Or you'd have to mail a check, right, and wait for the check to come in the mail. But by using AutoPay, I send an email link, and basically I send a link to the client. They put it through, and the money goes right in my account. So they could pay it whenever it's convenient for them.
Right.
So that's certainly helpful. Today I signed up for something that I've been procrastinating on forever, is DocuSign. Right? Like,
Okay.
I've been using it a million times, but like, it's one of these things where it's helpful. I mean, and the other thing is Zoom meetings. Some people would rather do a Zoom meeting than come in and see you. So I just, was retained within the last couple of months by somebody that lives in Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
So for her to drive to Staten Island, forget it, right? It would take forever. But we met on Zoom, we talked, and I emailed the retainer, she signed it, she scanned it and sent it back to me, and we were off and running. Now I could use DocuSign. But the ability to do Zoom meetings, I've done it now several times with clients where it was just more convenient for them. I may have small business owners that can't really leave their business, but they can get away for the 20 minutes they need to talk to me. They can go into another room.
But then again, see necessity. A client in Nassau County, business owner who cannot necessarily leave. But would you go 100% virtual for everything?
No, of course, no. I offer it as an option to
as
people,
an option,
right?
as a necessity.
Yeah, I tell people, look, and especially during the pandemic, where some people were less comfortable in meeting in person, right? So I said, if you want to meet in person, I'm willing to meet in person. We would wear masks. This is a big conference room. We'd stay on opposite sides and talk to one another. Or I would give people the opportunity to either talk on the phone or meet on Zoom, because sometimes people want to see you, right, and see what you look like and how you speak. So I did use Zoom, but I would say it was a small percentage overall of the cases. Most people that I met, most clients who want to come in and sit down and meet in person, get a cup of coffee.
Get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Coffee, as we said, right?
Coffee.
Yeah, but yeah.
All right, that's great. I don't have any more questions. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I think you got it covered.
I think we got it covered.
Yeah.
I think yes. I think
we did.
I thank you so much for your time. I really hope that we'll get a chance to sit down in a year, because this is an ongoing project, and
I'm in.
we explored the beginning, now we're exploring the middle of it, and hopefully next year we will explore the end and we will have something else to add. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.